Hello everyone and welcome to another video. On the 21st of June 1969, Patrick Troughton's tenure as the Doctor came to an end, with the final part of the War Games. After saying goodbye to his friends Jamie and Zoe, the second Doctor was placed on trial and sentenced to be exiled to Earth by the Time Lords, and they also forced him to regenerate. Sure enough, this would all come to pass, with Jon Pertwee taken over as the third Doctor from the 3rd of January 1970 onwards. But curiously, we didn't actually see the proper regeneration from Troughton to Pertwee on screen. All we saw was the second Doctor's form start to change as he spun around in a dark void, with the next episodes then seeing the newly regenerated third land on Earth and stagger out of the TARDIS. This was because when Troughton's final episode was filmed, Pertwee hadn't yet been cast as his successor, although he was publicly announced as such just before it aired, I believe. So it was all left deliberately open-ended until the War Games was colorized in 2024, of course, when a fan's take on a regeneration scene was included at the end. But in the meantime, this gap combined with a few other things, such as discrepancies of continuity, when Troughton returned for multi-Doctor stories later on, and when the third Doctor showed up with a bunch of gadgets that audiences had never seen before in his first story, Spearhead from Space, and the later rediscovery of some second Doctor TV comics by fans that depicted him as exiled but not yet regenerated. Fans came up with the idea of a Season 6B, where the second Doctor actually had more adventures set after the War Games and before he regenerated into the third. One of the two writers of the War Games and long-time Doctor Who contributor Terrance Dicks would later embrace this idea and explore it in a few novels in the late 90s to early 2000s. Big Finish would also later start their own take on the idea. But we never saw a proper televised version of the idea, of course. So what if things had gone differently? What if, in an alternate timeline, the War Games hadn't marked the end of the second Doctor's on-screen adventures? What if Season 6B had a proper TV run? Now obviously, this wouldn't have ever happened, realistically speaking. Patrick Troughton was exhausted and really eager to move on to other things by the time the War Games entered production. So the very idea of him staying on for even just a few more stories afterwards, it's just not plausible in the slightest. But we'll explore it anyway, as it is a fascinating idea to think about. We'll say that Troughton at the last moment rethinks his decision and decides to stay on for a tiny bit longer against his better judgment. Again, I know it's incredibly unlikely he would have done this, and I don't mean any disrespect to his memory by doing it. I'm simply doing this as a thought experiment. With this, the production team decides to split the upcoming 7th season in two. The first half would air in the autumn of 1969 and star Troughton, and the second would air in the new year in 1970 and star the new Doctor, who obviously would later become Jon Pertwee, as in, like, at that moment they didn't know it was going to be Pertwee, but obviously we know that it would eventually become Jon Pertwee. From there, the new format dates decided on for the show would have to wait a bit, as in the 25 or 26 episodes a year format, as the season would now be at least as long as the previous few. That's more like sort of 40 to nearly 50 odd episodes a year, just split into two halves, which gave the impression that Troughton was kind of being given less work, as he'd just have to do his share, even though it technically was still like a lot, but you see what I mean. All of this season would now be in colour though, including Troughton's half, so no more black and white days for Patrick Troughton era. And the reason why I've got all of it in colour is because at that point, you know, the BBC was pretty much moving away from black and white, doing things in black and white anyway. And obviously that's further reflected by the fact that in real life the show moved into colour in early 1970. So yeah, by the period of like when we're talking about, which is late 1969, early 1970, the BBC would still be moving away from doing productions in black and white and moving towards making them in colour, even though obviously not every person in the UK had a colour receiving television just yet, because they were still relatively new and quite expensive at that point. Now, originally I was just going to do what I always do of these and use a bunch of unmade stories, as well as maybe some from expanded media, but I've decided against that, as I feel like I want to try and create my own fairly original storylines, just to make this a bit more interesting. So that's what I'll mainly do, but I will still use some ideas from unmade and expanded universe stories. Anyway, so Troughton's half of this alternate season 7 would play out like this. Fall of Empire by Terence Diss, a 4-parter. This shares some similarities with the Past Doctor Adventures novel called World Game. The Doctor's sentence is temporarily paused by the shadowy Time Lord covert organisation, the Celestial Intervention Agency. They see the Doctor as being in a unique position due to his constant travels through time and space, and realise they could exploit this to their own benefit. They assign what is essentially a handler to him, a fresh recruit of theirs called Serena, played by Anne Bell. And then the Doctor is sent off on his first mission, right in the middle of the Battle of Waterloo. He has to prevent an alien race called the Temporalists from altering the course of human history by helping Napoleon Bonaparte win the battle. And at the end of this adventure, the Doctor is rewarded by the CIA by being given a homing device watch that homes in on the TARDIS in case he becomes separated from it for too long. The same watch that the third Doctor would have in Spearhead from Space. The Laws of Ice by Brian Hales, again a 4-parter. This sees the Doctor meets the Brigadier again, with them, together with the rest of UNIT, fighting against the Ice Warriors, who want to lower the Earth's temperature to better suit them. I used the Big Finish audio Wrath of the Ice Warriors for inspiration for this one. Briggs' involvement in this would mean that Nicholas Courtney would be filming this story first, before he did the rest of his appearances for the season alongside Pertwee. The Laird of Maccrimmon by Mervyn Haseman and Henry Lincoln, a 6-parter. Okay, yes, I'm using an unmade story, and therefore I've kind of broken my own rule, but I wouldn't keep it the exact same. Obviously, instead of this seeing Jamie return to his own time and place, he's now already back there, and has lived there for about 5 years, with most of his memories of the Doctor having been wiped, apart from their first meeting, of course, in the Highlanders. The Great Intelligence and Yeti are still the adversaries for this though, as the Intelligence seeks revenge against the Doctor and plans to subdue the entire human race in the 1750s. At the end, Jamie asks the Doctor if he can travel with him again, and obviously by this point he's probably gotten his memories back. You know, maybe the CIA or Serena kind of give his memories back, or maybe they just naturally, like, you know, the memory block is lifted by the Doctor's like intervention or something. I don't know. The Doctor explains his current predicament to him and then asks Serena about it. She coolly allows it, seeing it as another reward for the Doctor's continually good service to the CIA. In order for this story to be used, there would have to be a sort of reconciliation between Haseman and Lincoln and the show's production team, probably mainly with the show's then producer, Derek Sherwin. Now, I believe a reconciliation had probably taken place in real life before this point anyway, as Sherwin had already been in touch with them about, you know, asking for their permission to use the Brigadier as a regular character for season 7 onwards, and obviously Yeti would later appear in the War Games, which presumably they would have had to have given permission for that to happen. So yeah, I don't think it's too far-fetched to imagine that, that they would have made up by that point. I've just realised whilst editing this video together that I didn't actually discuss the behind-the-scenes explanation for Jamie's return. So I would imagine that, it's basically probably partly down to just Troughton's desire to work with his good friend Fraser Hines again. And so, he makes that known to the production team that if he's, going to do it for a little bit longer, then he would like it. He would prefer to be starring alongside Fraser again for a little while. Which, yeah, I think makes sense. The two of them were very close personal friends in real life, so yeah, I can see that happening. The next story is The Space Vampires by Robert Holmes. This is another 4-parter. Doctor and Jamie land on a space station in the far future. They discover that crew members are being killed, with all the iron in their blood systems being drained out of them. And this has some similarities with Holmes's unmade story, The Aliens in the Blood. Operation Werewolf by Douglas Camfield and Robert Kitts, a 6-parter. Okay, yes, I've used another unmade story, but it is a very good one, and I could quite easily see it fitting in very well with all of this, Season 6B stuff. The only real change would be that it would obviously feature just Jamie as a companion to the Doctor. Well, unless you want to count Serena, of course, instead of Victoria or Zoe being there as well. Now, it might seem a bit strange to use an unmade story that I think was submitted during the course of Season 5 and was meant to be for Season 6, to use that for basically an alternate Season 7. I don't really have any real defense for that, apart from that I just really like it as a story idea. I really like the Big Finish adaptation of it, so yeah, that's the only reason why it's here, to be honest. Yeah, it's probably not that realistic, but then neither is this whole scenario, to be honest, so there you go. Then the final Season 6B story will be The Inevitable Fate by Malcolm Hulke, a 2-parter. Yes, I know 2-parters weren't a thing for Troughton's televised tenure. I think, some of the Second Doctor era Big Finish audios are 2-parters, but I thought it would be best to go with that kind of format for this final, almost Coda-like, I want to say, kind of part in the whole Season 6B saga. This sees the Doctor and Jamie land on contemporary Earth and investigate some strange reports of some scarecrows coming to life on some nearby farmlands and terrorizing the locals. It turns out that they are actually agents of the Time Lords, recruited to inform the Doctor that his services for the CIA are no longer required, and that his sentence will now be completely carried out, with him being forced to regenerate. And so then they drag him off back to the TARDIS as he starts to regenerate. Jamie is returned to his own time, this time hopefully without another memory wipe, with Serena being promoted for her success in being their handler on the various missions. She does express some regret at the fates of the Doctor and Jamie though, and secretly steals a time ring when her superiors aren't looking, wanting to check in on them both every now and then. So she'll go on to observe the newly regenerated Third Doctor during his exile on Earth from a distance, and then do the same for Jamie when he's in his own time period. But all of that would happen off screen and just be implied rather than shown, of course. I mean, it's the kind of thing that, like, I think on screen, most all we would get is probably like Serena looking a bit sad about the way the Doctor and Jamie, about their fates. Maybe we might see it as far as looking at a time ring or something like that. But then it's not actually explained fully what happened with all of that until some expanded universe short story comes along later, like 20, 30 years later. And, kind of explores that. Although, we could always replace a second Doctor short story from the Target storybook collection which was released in 2018 or 2019, which was called Save Yourself, and it was written by Terrance Dicks, and that could be replaced quite easily with this whole Serena thing. I think that would actually be quite a good slot for it, actually. So yeah, I think go with that, actually. And yeah, I did deliberately take the Scarecrows, their identity as Time Lord agents, and then dragging Doctor off whilst he regenerates from the TV comic story, The Nightwalkers. Basically, the reason why is because I just think it's an effective way to show the second Doctor's actual regeneration, Obviously, the actual regeneration will probably take place inside the TARDIS, I think. Yeah. This Troughton-led first half would air weekly from the 16th of August 1969 to 7th of February 1970, after a 7-week break since the end of the previous Season 6. And then the alternate Season 7 would continue with Jon Pertwee's debut in the first episode of Spearhead from Space the following week, on the 14th of February 1970. I wouldn't make any changes to any of Pertwee's stories for that season, so it would still come to an end with the 7th and final episode of Inferno, airing on the 1st of August of that year. So this now means that the season would have been airing for almost a whole year, with a whopping total of 51 episodes. That's only one less than the maximum amount each season of the show could be back in the 1960s. So yeah, I don't envy the schedulers of that at the time, or the production team in the slightest. Yeah, so it would be split between, I think, about 25 or 26 episodes that feature Pertwee as a Doctor, and then I think about 26 again for Troughton. Now that I think about it, it probably would have been easier if I'd have just had this an alternate Season 7 be solely Patrick Troughton's final season, even if it's literally just like a shortened run, like even being half the length of the 26 episodes a year format, or 25, and then just have Jon Pertwee's version of Season 7 become the alternate Season 8. I think that might have gone a bit better now that I think about it. I can imagine that Troughton's half would be filmed first, thus having a knock-on effect on Pertwee's, with the latter now having to be filmed later than in real life. This split Season 7 could also allow Derek Sherwin's tenure as producer to last a little bit longer, although it would probably be for just like an extra story or two at the most, as he would still move over to Paul Temple not long afterwards and be replaced by Barry Letts. As for Serena, she would start out as the Doctor's cool, icy, kind of emotionally detached handler, with her having very little interest in a Doctor's welfare or even any sense of morality, unless it gets in the way of the mission. But over time, she would come to respect the Doctor's way of doing things, and even grow to like him on a personal level. And the same for Jamie once he returns, which is why she would ultimately decide to check in on the two of them every now and then, just to make sure that they're both doing okay. So think of her as starting out like the Serena from the World Game book, and yes, I did deliberately base her off that version, as well as Raven from the Big Finish Season 6B audio series, in some ways anyway. But she's warmed to the Doctor and Jamie a lot by the time that they all have to part ways. And by that point, she's become more of a companion type of character, rather than just like a reluctant ally or handler/monitor. And yes, as I hinted at earlier, the Doctor would receive some rewards from the CIA for successfully completing each of his missions. These would vary from the homing device watch and Jamie's return to Statenheim remote control. we saw him use in The Two Doctors. But I wouldn't have this happen in every story, as it would quickly feel just too repetitive and boring, so just in a few of them. But this scenario isn't all that likely to have ever happened, and as much as I would never turn down the idea of my favourite Doctor having a few more on-screen stories, I think it's for the best that we never got a televised version of Season 6B, especially as if the one I laid out in this had happened, then everyone on the cast and crew would have been absolutely shattered by the end of it. Plus, it could potentially have had a knock-on effect on when each of the subsequent Pertwee seasons entered production and were then transmitted. And obviously, the very idea of Season 6B wouldn't be the exact same if it's an era that's already been explored on TV, very much. But there's my take on what if Season 6B had a proper TV run. What do you think? Do you like it or not? And would you have done anything differently? Please let me know in the comments section below. Anyway, so thanks for watching. I hope you liked it. Please don't forget to press that subscribe button below, as well as press the bell icon at the side of it, so that you'll stay notified of when all my new videos come out. And I shall see you all in another video. So until next time, bye bye. Doctor's sentence is temporarily paused by the shadowy Time Lord covert what? And yes, as I hinted at earlier, the Doctor would receive some rewards from the CIA for successfully completing each of his missions. I bloody hope that I get some rewards for finishing this video. I think it's for the best that we never got a televised version of Season 6B, especially as if the one I laid out in this had happened, then everyone on the cast and crew would have been absolutely shattered by the end of it. I know I am absolutely shattered just from recording this. Plus, it could potentially have had a knock-on effect on when each of the subsequent Pertwee stories, Pertwee seasons even. Oh, so close. So close. But so far. Anyway, so thanks for watching. I hope you liked it. Please don't forget to press that bell icon at the side of it so that you'll stay notified of when all my new videos come out. And I shall see you all in another video. So until next time, bye bye. Oh, thank God that's done with. Oh, God, I've not missed recording these what ifs. I really haven't. Yeah. There you go.